Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Friday edition of the Chris Salcedo Show here on Newsmax TV. As always, we have a jam-packed show for you. Since the Socialist Democrats have turned impeachment into a political weapon instead of a tool of last resort, it's my sad duty to report that, well, we can expect every occupant of the Oval Office to be impeached from here on out. I know it's a sad state of affairs for the United States. The great Trish Regan, in the meantime, is going to be here to discuss AOC's lack of knowledge of the Constitution, what it means to be an American, and Big Tech's war on free speech in America. Dave Rubin and the CEO of MeWe, Mark Weinstein. They are here to talk about the Democrats' cancerous cancel culture in America. But before we dive into all of that, I want to talk to some specific people tonight in America. Because of your lack of vision, your hate, and absence of intellect, or simply because some of you have just tuned out. A storm is coming your way that I suspect you are not prepared for. Be careful what you wish for. We expand on old words of wisdom in tonight's preamble. I first want to address the liberal biased press. For years, the Chris Salcedo Show has been warning that your unfair treatment of Republicans and conservatives and your looking the other way on socialist Democrat malfeasance and treachery would come back to bite you. In the last election cycle, you people in the socialist press, you bashed, you lied about, and you hounded arguably the most transparent president in American history, President Trump. Every time I turned around, the president was talking with one of you shrubs, giving you exclusive interviews. It infuriated me. I couldn't fathom why Trump would devote so much of his valuable time to a press that committed themselves to delivering for my and Trump's political enemies, the socialists. Trump's conduct with the press was a stark contrast to President Obama. Obama used the awesome power of the federal government, remember, to spy on and charge members of the alleged free press. Obama, after promising to be the most transparent administration in history, blah, 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 he turned out to be one of the most secretive, according to the Washington Post's media columnist, Margaret Sullivan. But as I've said before, the majority of the press are dedicated Democrats, not dedicated journalists. And now the efforts of you people in the press have led to this.
And some of my discussions have brought up media literacy because that is a part of what happened here. We're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation.
The leader of the squad is now promising to rein in you folks in the press. Now, many of you will dutifully come to the American people so you can keep a job spewing state-approved propaganda. Now, one can hardly blame you. Many Americans would do the same thing to protect their families, keep a roof over their head, and food on the table. Countless left-wing governments have seized control over their media using the same tactics on display by collectivists in Congress. But it didn't have to be this way. You people in the press could have exposed these socialists, told the truth about them when you had the chance. You could have lived up to the vision of the founders, what they saw when they set apart the free press, the only job articulated in the Constitution as being essential to keeping America free. But you, led by men like Chris Wallace, Chuck Todd, and Chris Cuomo, you blew it. Now, whatever's left of the free press will disappear in short order, just as it has done for centuries when free countries have fallen to collectivist thought. The next group I want to address is the GOP. In particular, I'd like to address Liz Cheney, Adam Kissinger, Fred Upton, and the rest of you folks in the Gang of 10 who voted to impeach President Trump. In the last 48 hours, we as a nation have learned some things. For days after January 6th, the aforementioned press, even Fox News, and government officials assured Americans that BLM and Antifa were nowhere near that riot in the U.S. Capitol. Yesterday, a Utah man, John Earl Sullivan, was arrested. He is an Antifa and BLM activist who has appeared on CNN. I wonder how many more of these Democrat militants were present on that day. Catherine Herridge of CBS News, one of the few remaining journalists left in America, reported that the timeline for the riot didn't exactly match up with Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi's impeachment narrative. Turns out pipe bombs were placed at the DNC and RNC, and the breach of the Capitol was well underway long before President Trump finished his speech. Herridge's reporting is buttressed by the FBI finally admitting that they had intelligence that says the Capitol Hill riot was pre-planned. Question: how can President Trump be responsible for inciting the riot at the Capitol when it looks like it was pre-planned and that the attack was underway long before President Trump finished speaking? Perhaps that's why Nancy Pelosi didn't include specific language used by the president that supposedly spurred the riot, because he said nothing that caused that riot. Now, we expect Pelosi and her merry band of Marxists, we expect them to lie. That's what left-wingers do. But you wouldn't expect Liz Cheney to make such a buffoonish vote without having all the facts. Although I gotta say, whenever I think buffoon these days, Adam Kissinger's name leaps right to the top of my head. Perhaps the Gang of 10 should have waited until they had all the facts before lodging their vote of vengeance against President Trump. I don't know. Silly me. But Adam, Liz, and Fred, well, they couldn't wait to throw in with the socialists. Now, here's their reward.
So the first step is impeach and remove, which is also about ensuring that he cannot be, so that he is barred from running for public office again. The second is to expel those members who have aided and abetted and been complicit in the cruelty, the corruption, and the criminality of this administration, who perpetuated the big lie.
Did you guys catch that? Presley wants to tie every Republican to the false narrative it's looking like of the Capitol attack as a mechanism to toss out GOP members who worked with or supported their president. This is, of course, criminalizing being a Republican. And Liz Cheney and Adam Kissinger and Fred Upton, well, they couldn't wait to turn over power to these lying totalitarians. Don't worry, Liz. I'm sure you're going to survive the first purge. After all, the Democrats and CNN, they love your kind of Republican. Lastly, I want to address the American people. You're watching an attempt by the socialists to impeach and remove President Trump based on his inciting violence that's turning out he didn't incite. Consider this.
Some of the success that we've been able to achieve around criminal justice reform would not have happened in recent years were it not for Black Lives Matter. And the intensity and the brilliance of that movement that forced at least that there would be some counterforce to the status quo, which is so reluctant for change, if not hostile to change. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And this is a movement, I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not.
That was Kamala Harris, Biden's pick for VP. As Antifa terrorists and BLM thugs were burning, looting, beating, and killing their way through America's streets, there was Harris, Senator Harris, cheering them on and saying the violence should continue. But there was nobody proposing treating Harris in the same manner that Trump is being treated. Nobody is advocating that Pelosi, Presley, or Maxine Waters, or any other Democrat socialist who actually did cheer on the violence that dominated 2020, the same unfair way President Trump is being treated. I'm hoping we, the people, learn the lessons that the press and the 10 wayward Republicans didn't learn. I'm hoping we can all see the double standard that is in the process of being imposed on our nation. Socialists can do whatever the hell they want, and the GOP and conservatives must be prosecuted, silenced, and penalized based on completely fabricated charges. The American people should learn this lesson, and they should learn it fast, because the leftists are coming for all of us next. Now, let's get to your top stories. Major document dump expected today in the Russiagate collusion hoax. Justice Department opening a new investigation in the Capitol Hill riots into itself. And Joe Biden unveils a China virus stimulus plan one prominent economist is calling a debt bomb. So, to the top stories, newly declassified documents in the Russiagate investigation are set to be released today. The information is expected to include hundreds of pages of depositions, interviews, and transcripts related to the investigation into the Russia collusion hoax, or lie, as I like to call it. Last year, the Senate Intelligence Committee issued a report saying there was no evidence that Trump and the campaign ever colluded with Russia, despite the Obama administration's effort to imply otherwise.
I think this is going to be the most serious, damning information that's going to harm the Obama administration. It has the potential to focus and shine a different light on an incoming Biden administration, and we'll see how far this information actually impacts Joe Biden in the early stages of his presidency.
Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Lindsey Graham called the initial probe one of the most incompetent and corrupt investigations in history. And that's being kind. Special counsel investigation into the conduct of FBI agents in the Crossfire Hurricane operation is ongoing. Justice Department, in the meantime, today opened an internal review of its response to last week's riot on Capitol Hill. The investigation will examine just what security intel the department had before the deadly storming of the building and how well it shared that information with other agencies, if at all. They will also be looking at procedures and protocols to see if any of that hindered their ability to effectively respond to the event. Since the Justice Department has no jurisdiction over local police, the review will be centered around the department's leadership and the FBI. The only law enforcement officers present at the Capitol that day were the Capitol and D.C. Metro Police Departments. The former chief of Capitol Police claimed that when it was clear his forces were going to be overwhelmed, he asked for help from the DOJ 6 times throughout the day and was repeatedly denied. It took several hours before the National Guard was mobilized to help, and by that time, the worst of it was over. Leadership of the Department of Justice and the FBI in particular has been called into question ever since that deadly event. We've never been a fan of Christopher Wray anyway. The poor response from the DOJ has also sent officials into overdrive ahead of the inauguration next week. More than 20,000 National Guard troops have been sleeping on the floor of the Capitol at some points, and most of the city, the nation's capital, is on lockdown. More evidence that stability in the Middle East, by the way, will crumble further if Joe Biden rejoins the Iran nuclear deal. An Israeli newspaper today reporting that the Israeli Defense Force is drawing up plans for an airstrike targeting Iran's nuclear program. The report comes a day after an Israeli minister said flat out that if the U.S. rejoins the agreement with Tehran, Israel would then be left standing alone against Iran and have no choice but to strike. Tehran has taken a significant new step toward nuclear weapons production, beginning construction of equipment that can produce uranium metal and material used at the core of nuclear warheads. Earlier this week, the UN's nuclear watchdog, such as it is, reported that Iran is taking major steps toward advancing its nuclear weapons program, and it isn't even attempting to hide it. You'll remember that Barack Hussein Obama and Joe Biden, they created the Obama-Ayatollah nuke deal. It guaranteed that Iran would become a nuclear power within a decade. The plan also didn't prevent Iran from testing and perfecting ICBM technology during that same decade. AOC needs to go back to school, or at least check out an episode or 2 of Schoolhouse Rock, because her most recent comments have made it painfully clear she has no idea what the Constitution says. Trish Regan is here to educate the Congresswoman from New York. Coming up next on Newsmax TV.
Even Wall Street firms have reinforced the logic. If we invest now boldly, smartly, and with unwavering focus on American workers and families, we will strengthen our economy, reduce inequity, and put our nation's long-term finances on the most sustainable course.
Oh, there's that propaganda word, invest. That's government spending. Joe Biden showing off his monstrosity of a China virus stimulus plan, $1.9 trillion. Someone should probably tell him that this country is already $27 trillion in debt and counting. Here's the socialist wish list. He's going to get $1,400 checks for most Americans. That's on top of the $600 already approved. He wants to increase the unemployment benefit to $400. He wants a $15 minimum wage, which will bankrupt small businesses and force massive layoffs, as it did in Seattle when they tried it. And he wants to extend the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums through September. Don't necessarily object to that. The proposal bails out poorly run left-wing states. If Biden's plan doesn't sound sustainable to all of you, well, here's what economist Stephen Moore told Sean Kreisman on National Report earlier this morning.
This is a gut check moment for the Republican Party. You have to have, I've read through most of the plan now. It is a fiscal atrocity. It is $1.9 trillion on top of the nearly $4 trillion we've already spent and borrowed. This is a debt bomb that will really hurt our country's economy as we go forward. Anyone who believed that electing Joe Biden, you were going to get a moderate Democrat, take a look at this plan, folks. I mean, it is the Bernie Sanders wish list. There is nothing moderate about this plan. It is a far left, radical left program. This is an indication that the Bernie Sanders wing of the party is what's going to be running this White House.
Everything you just heard there was absolutely correct, but it's not a gut check for Republicans. They can't do a damn thing to stop it. Joining me now is Trish Regan, host of the Trish Intel podcast. Hey, Trish, kind of a budget buster, isn't it?
Yeah, like I'm just sort of flabbergasted because I have no idea where this money's coming from. And let me be clear, like I've never liked the idea of handouts here. To me, Chris, it's pretty obvious what needs to be done. You got to get Americans back to work. You've got to do everything you can to make sure the people have the vaccines, that the people that need protection, right, are taken care of, but everybody else just has to get back to work. That is the answer. And so what I would love to see is a program where you actually think about how to incentivize people to be back in the workforce. And you do that how? Through lower taxes. I mean, if you're going to spend money, I would much prefer to see lower taxes for individuals and small businesses than these handouts that don't discriminate, by the way. I mean, everybody gets a handout. I don't care if you've been working for the government and had a job this entire time. You're still going to get your $1,400 check. Listen, everything comes with a price. Money does not grow on trees, even though some there in Washington, D.C., some of those lawmakers think so.
Yep. No, you're absolutely correct. But the people who are now in charge, the socialists, that's not how they think. They have no imagination. And as a matter of fact, you've watched over these last few months, Democrats saying, shut down businesses, shut down businesses. There are many of, what is it? I heard some staggering statistic, 40% of businesses won't even be coming back after all the Democrat socialist lockdowns. So the only way people are going to be able to get by is through government handouts because work is no longer coveted. Speaking of people not understanding the free enterprise system or America, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the self-proclaimed socialist congresswoman from New York, huh? What? Yeah, she is out there pledging to rein in the media, using some sort of commission, the Ministry of Truth, to tell basically people in journalism, what's permissible to say and what's not.
I'm guessing that you and I both speak Spanish better than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Anyway, listen, this is alarming. And, normally I'd sort of say, okay, well, she's sort of out there in left field, literally. And so we don't need to pay much attention to it. But given the environment in which we now live, where you have, hordes of people effectively trying to demonize half the population and tell 75 million people, because they believe in a meritocracy and they believe in the American dream and they believe in freedom and fairness, that they are somehow bad people because they voted for Donald Trump. I'm very aware of how heightened her language is right now. So when she starts to say, Chris, that they need some kind of reining in, they need to rein in the media and the press, let's be very clear. And she's talking about congressional friends of hers, right, that are working on this. Let's be very clear. Our First Amendment allows us this freedom of speech and freedom of the press. That is right there in the U.S. Constitution, the very First Amendment. So, you know, someone like her, one, they ought to actually read the Constitution before they become Congress people. But two, I mean, we can't, you know, as much as I just want to say, well, you know, it's her, let's consider what's going on right now. I mean, this to me is very, very frightening. I'm telling you, I have never in my entire history, in my entire career as a journalist, felt so extraordinarily uncomfortable and sort of aware, because there's this big brother, big tech, big government sort of looking over you. I mean, someone said to me the other day, be very careful about saying the word patriot. I'm like, what? Or live free or die. That's the you know, on the license plate of every car in the state I grew up in. You know, it was some of the first words I learned to read, live free or die, in the state of New Hampshire. You can't really say that right now because it's taking on this whole other connotation, right? I mean, they'll come after you for these little things. To think that Ron Paul, for example, had his Facebook page shut down the other day. Ron Paul, who just wants a gold standard, right? And absolutely no war whatsoever. So I feel like we're in a very heightened environment. Emotions are very, very high right now. People are very, very sensitive. And for her to say something like that, bad move.
Yeah, and you know what? The lack of condemnation from the likes of CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the silence is deafening. But again, they've come this far. They might as well just sign up for state-run media. Trish, talk to you next week. Thank you very much. Folks, if you support liberty and free speech, the left doesn't like you very much, and they will not stop until your voice is completely silenced. But there's a Facebook alternative out there designed to keep that from happening. The CEO of MeWe joins me next on Newsmax TV. Folks, we'll make a connection with a CEO executive coming up here in mere moments. In the meantime, we shared the clip earlier in the week of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo now saying New York has to open nearly a year after starting all of his draconian lockdown measures. Now, following suit, Chicago's mayor, Lori Lightfoot. She's walking the same hypocrite path. Lightfoot says she wants to reopen all bars and restaurants as soon as possible. Now, this happens with Biden allegedly coming into the office and after Americans begin to get vaccinated from COVID-19. Indoor dining across the state of Illinois has been banned since October. Good grief. Staying in the Empire State, New York City will also finally soon be freed of Mayor Bill de Blasio with his second term ending this year. Many people are throwing parties over this, I hear. Former presidential candidate Andrew Yang has announced he is running for New York City mayor. He joined a crowded Democrat socialist primary field for the June mayoral primary. Yang garnered some support in the presidential race when he proposed a universal basic income, a fancy word for socialism. And speaking out about de Blasio, he announced Wednesday the city is terminating several contracts with the Trump Organization in the wake of last week's storming of the U.S. Capitol, which was also, now we know, attended by Black Lives Matter. Trump Organization currently operates the Carousel in Central Park, 2 skating rinks, and golf course. City Hall is now canceling their agreements with the company. A spokesperson for the Trump Organization responded saying that the city of New York has no legal right to end these contracts, calling it political discrimination, which is true. Speaking of de Blasio, he announced Wednesday the city is terminating those contracts, as I just told you. And I got to tell you, Bill de Blasio, talk about another sterling example of hypocrisy. As I said, the Trump Organization currently operating the Carousel in Central Park. And again, I think the Trump folks are not going to take this lying down. Stick around, folks. We got more coming up. The Chris Salcedo Show on Newsmax TV. Be right back. Welcome back, everybody. CNN's Don Lim doubling down on his demonization of all Trump supporters following last week's rush to the Capitol. He argued that it's valid to associate everyone who voted for President Trump with neo-Nazis and members of the KKK. He remained doubling down on his divisive opinion.
There are a lot of people who voted for Trump who don't agree with you.
That's fine. They are allowed to their own opinion. It doesn't mean that they're right, but they're allowed to their own opinion, and I believe what I said last night.
Just because you vote for the same people doesn't mean that you believe the same things.
Puts you in the same crowd. Yes, it does.
It puts you in the same group of people who voted for him, but you may not have the same reasons, you may not have the same understanding.
You vote for people who have common interests. If someone has a common interest, people who vote like you have a common interest as you.
Joining me now, the host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin. Welcome back, sir. You know, that's all they do over at CNN, left-wing opinion. And that's, you know, they laughingly slap the news label on it, and you and I both know that's not at all news. Now, we rationalized yesterday using Mr. Don Lim's logic that because China supported Mr. Biden in his election bid, and that China is a country that enslaves 3 million Muslims, that Don Lim should never have supported a candidate supported by a country that undertakes slavery. Is it fair of me to say that?
I mean, going by his logic, I suppose it's fair. I mean, it's really sad what these people have become. And, you know, just real quick on CNN outside of Lemon, and then we'll get to that. You know, people wanted CNN to be the rational, centrist, you know, truly journalistic outfit that perhaps it once was. I mean, I remember when I was in 7th grade and we went into Iraq in the original Gulf War and everyone was glued to CNN. I remember watching it in social studies and they were showing us things happening on the ground that were real. And it's become basically all opinion now masked as journalism. So it should be just very clear to anyone watching, Don Lemon is not a journalist. He is a pretend journalist who's constantly telling you what he thinks. By the way, I am someone that for my living, I tell people what I think, but I'm not pretending to be something that I'm not. This idea that all Trump supporters are white supremacists or neo-Nazis or whatever, I mean, it's just the end extension of everything they've been saying about all of us this entire time. I can tell you I went to several Trump rallies here in Los Angeles. I saw the most diverse, interesting, fun, happy group of people that wanted to come together because they love America and wave some flags. I never saw a racist at one of these things. I never heard a racist message or a homophobic message or anything else. But that's all they got. They don't have arguments. They got you're racist, or the new one, which will be now you're a seditionist.
Right. I hear you. And again, this is just a par for the course. Demonize your opposition with fake charges, false charges, to get them to shut up and to quit opposing you. It's a non-thinking, and nobody thinks less on American television than Don Lim. Let me just ask you, is it fair of me to classify you as maybe a center guy, maybe even center-left? Is that fair?
Well, I wouldn't say center-left anymore. I have no problem being, look, I wrote a whole book defending classical liberalism by any stretch in our modern world in effective libertarianism. I would say I'm a new school conservative at this point. But yes, I came from the left. I will concede that.
I got you. Yeah, I think classical liberal might be a good thing. And then, you know, a neoconservative, not a neoconservative, but a new age conservative. But
a new school conservative, I think.
There you go, new school conservative. What separates you from the likes of Jack Dorsey, separates you from the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, is that you believe in open and honest conversations with those whom you might have a political disagreement. That separates you from a whole host of what the American left represents today. And I got to ask you, as a guy who makes his bones, makes his opinions on digital media, how concerned are you, because you've got a target on your back because you're reasonable and you actually will talk to a conservative. They don't like you because you actually want to have a conversation.
I got to tell you, Chris, maybe I'll whisper this, but conservatives are a lot nicer. They're a lot happier, and they're a lot more open-minded. That's the dirty secret about conservatives that you find out once you start talking to them. I mean, look, you know, people that run tech companies, at some level, I have a certain degree of sympathy with them because they are now trying to deal with problems that I don't think they really anticipated having 20 years ago. You know what I mean? When Zuckerberg was creating Facebook at Harvard, you know, to basically meet girls, I don't think he anticipated that he would be silencing the president of the United States. In no way is that an excuse, and it shows that these things have become extraordinarily powerful and at the same time kind of dangerous. But I would say for anyone watching this, if you're a conservative, if you're a libertarian, if you love America and you love capitalism, well, build it, man, build it. You know, I started a tech company about 2 years ago called locals.com, and we're sort of building a bottom-up internet. We're building you digital homes to do what you want with, and you own all your stuff and set your own rules. It's not the perfect solution, but it's one of the solutions, and I believe in human ingenuity. And as long as these guys don't take out all of the competition, and by the way, I would argue that what Amazon did to Parler, in effect, was just taking out the competition. It wasn't necessarily about free speech, because, you know, you can go on Twitter any moment and find the endless, bottomless pit of horrible things that are being said on there. So to me, it was more like, oh, let's just take out the competition. Parler's doing pretty well. That's not a defense of everything that was said on Parler. And I think that they had to deal with some of the more vile stuff and violent stuff. They had to do a better job of it. But that's not why they were taken out. They were taken out because they were doing something that was attracting eyeballs.
Yeah. And you know what? If you're Twitter trying to cast stones, you host the Ayatollah Khomeini, a guy who wants to eliminate Jews off the planet. Seriously? You want to lecture us on proper moderation? Give me a break. Hey, look, I'm just worried about guys like you. Because look, I mean, this is the problem. Just for talking to somebody like me, you're gonna have a target, and I can't believe this is the United States of America. Look, I gotta fly. I will talk to you again soon, sir. Thanks for being here on the Salcedo Show, folks. Coming up, more on the attack on free speech. MeWe's CEO Mark Weinstein here to weigh in next. My friends, if you are shocked by Apple, Google, and Amazon, Twitter, and Facebook's attacks on free speech, you ain't seen nothing yet. An apparent leaked recording of Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey suggests that the company's policy enforcement actions will go beyond banning the leader of the free world, President Trump. But to what end remains to be seen. Project Veritas, who released the recording, claims the footage is from a Twitter whistleblower who recorded Dorsey's comments to his staff, basically saying there's more banning to come. Joining me now, the CEO of MeWe, freedom of speech platform there, Mark Weinstein. I commend you, first off, sir, for your courage for coming on this program, standing against enemies of American freedom. You know, the horror stories we're all hearing from Parler, they're chilling. Our sources saying big tech is actually using threats and intimidation to ruin Parler. Why haven't the big 5 tech companies been successful in attacking MeWe?
Well, Chris, first of all, you know, you really want to look at moderation as a double standard. You know, MeWe is pro-democracy, and democracy, the foundation of democracy is the freedom to disagree. But it's the freedom to disagree civilly, and that's very important. Now, the moderation on social networks is not a bad thing. It allows good people of all persuasions, of all beliefs, to engage and enjoy, you know, good, healthy conversation, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anton Scalia did, and they were best friends. So, you know, what's happening right now is this double standard. MeWe has moderation, but we don't have a political bias. We don't care what your religion or your politics or your health issues or, you know, your sexual preferences or your finances, et cetera. That's none of our business. Just keep it civil. But the double standard, what they do, they just kicked off, Facebook just kicked off Ron Paul. If I think I'm right about that, right? They just kicked off Ron Paul, and
that's what we heard.
Twitter's trending, hang Mike Pence. Twitter's trending, hang Mike Pence on Saturday to millions of people. That's the double standard. It's like, guys, what's going on here? What's going on? Let's get this moderation right, and MeWe has it right. And also, it's really simple. At MeWe, you can't amplify a conversation anyhow. You can't pay to boost anything to any of our members, whether you're a politician or an advertiser or a marketer. So MeWe is just civil conversations with good people. And actually, MeWe is really not about politics. MeWe is a social network competing with Facebook, but MeWe is social done right. We respect your privacy. We don't sell your data. We don't let anybody target you. You have a privacy bill of rights. And we just ask our members to keep it civil.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, today is the last day the Chris Salcedo Show will be on Facebook. We're leaving, and because I just abhor silencing of free speech. I abhor anti-Americanism, and Facebook and Twitter are the embodiment of anti-Americanism as they embrace, as they reject the leader of the free world and President Trump, and they embrace guys like the Ayatollah Khomeini. Let me ask you, since this attack on freedom of speech and what I believe is liberty and freedom that we Americans love and enjoy, how has your platform been impacted? Have you seen an increase in people joining up on MeWe?
Well, again, really interesting question. Here's what's lost in the mix of the news. Last week, Facebook, in another egregious move, changed the privacy policies for 2 billion WhatsApp users. Now, WhatsApp users all saw this. So what happened is now WhatsApp users have to give their data to Facebook. Otherwise, you can't use WhatsApp. Is that crazy? So this combined with everything, people are so pissed off. Several weeks ago, Twitter was fined millions of dollars for violating their data use policies and misusing member data. So what's happened is people are just furious with the censorship, with the data privacy violations, with everything unfair, and also with the algorithm that boosts content into their news feeds that incites them, incites violence, incites. They purposely boost outrageous content. They allow it to target. Look at Facebook yesterday, or was it this week? Facebook was running military supplies ads to anybody who was looking at the riots, talking about militias. I mean, come on, let's see these guys for who they are. There's a double standard. It's wrong. But MeWe is here. MeWe social done right. We're the new mainstream. We're for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're seeing an uptick in business and people signing up. Oh, good.
Yeah, combination of both sides.
Yeah, Mark. Look, I got a Mark. I got a scoop. But look, I am glad you're there because there are a lot of freedom-loving Americans who don't like censorship who will probably find your platform because I think you're one of the few that's functioning right now, sir. I appreciate the time. God bless you, Mark Weinstein. Everybody, MeWe is the name of the social media platform. You betcha, sir. One other thing, folks. Just as an aside, on Facebook, they have advertisements up in there and I bought them. They're all Chinese companies, some of these products, and they were garbage, absolute garbage. All right, coming up, Hollywood's pathetic attempt at removing Donald Trump from an iconic film actually ends up being a pretty hilarious meme. We'll let you know what that is coming up on Newsmax TV. All right, folks, want to ask you to keep it right here on Newsmax TV. Spicer and Company, they roll your way next. Shauna Lindsay will be speaking with South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Make sure you stick in to watch that. Now, one last thing. You guys know actor Macaulay Culkin, right? A childhood actor, grew up to be actually I haven't seen him in anything lately. He is supporting this movement to remove President Trump's cameo in the 1992 film Home Alone 2. The scene takes place in the plaza lobby and is no longer than 5 seconds, really. This is what the left is focusing on, folks, right now. They're trying to expunge all mentions of President Trump in popular culture or anyplace else. Well, a new version of the movie scene has already been created by the Daily Wire. Check this out.
Excuse me, where's the lobby?
True international effort to pressure.
Thanks.
That's, of course, a little head of Joe Biden that was superimposed on there, and one of his moments where he was uttering complete gibberish. That'll wrap it up here for this edition of the Chris Salcedo Show. Please do not forget to catch the Salcedo Show Weekend Edition, recapping all of our coverage of the past week's news, President Trump's trials and tribulations, security concerns at the U.S. Capitol as we approach January 20th. All right, folks, Spicer and Company coming your way next. See you on Monday on Newsmax TV.